And we're live, Will Leach. Welcome back. You made it.
I made it to the Mindstate Marketing Hour today.
So today, we got a really good show, and we're excited about this. We got a little music playing. But do you know about this book?
I've seen a book like that before. I've seen a book
there
like that.
Yeah. So this book is called Marketing to Mind States. It's the central topic of this conversation every week. And our brother, Will Leach, he's the man he's the scientist, he's the marketer, he's a man, he's a family man as well. And that's where the Mindstate Marketing Hour comes in. And our sites, he doesn't wear a coat, doesn't wear a lab coat. And then we have our guest today is Mark Hatcher. Mark, he's in the house now.
Hey.
And we're starting the show. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you for having me.
Of course, Mark. Hey, Steve, I told you a little bit about Mark, but Mark and I go back a long ways. I've had incredibly in-depth, just great personal conversations with Mark. We've grown our families over 20 years right now, Mark. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We've known each other that long.
A long time.
Mark has a very special kind of background and a set of experiences. And though we talk a lot about marketing on the Mindstate Marketing Hour, rightfully so, we're going to steer the conversation slightly in a different place. So I want to first introduce Mark Hatcher to my guests out there, and then Mark, I'm just going to have you just kind of weigh in a little bit. So hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to bring in Mark Hatcher, DEI pipeline leader at Amazon Studios.
That's right.
He's going to be sharing a story around how he really helps top brands put the world or grow by putting people first, and really the success that comes out of it. I'm going to talk about personal success, but also business success when you bring others along and you bring people and get the most out of people. He's currently the program management lead of pipeline programs for Amazon Studios DEI team. I'm going to let him tell a lot more about that role. Basically, he leads entertainment industry inclusion programming for interns and newly minted graduates with direct leadership of the Howard University Entertainment Program. You're a Howard grad, right?
No, Morehouse.
Oh, you're Morehouse. Oh, I can't believe it. Okay, Morehouse. That's right. Hey, so prior to Amazon, guys, Mark has done he's worked with a lot of big companies at a lot of big companies. He's worked at Coca-Cola, Microsoft, Cintas, Florida Power & Light. That's where I met him. Harley Davidson Motor Company and the Seattle Seahawks. And when he's not kind of working in the space of helping to build brands, he's a member of the Amazon Black Employee Network. And he also serves as a volunteer engagement champion for Connect at Amazon, a conscious fathering instructor, actually, for Parent Trust, a Seattle not-for-profit. But you've done that in other places outside of Seattle, haven't you, Mark?
Nope. I had a baby in Seattle, and then I became involved. That's right.
I want to talk about that, too, because that's really cool. And then also on top of that, he's an associate professor of leadership and management at Central Washington University. And then on top of that, he's not just a guy who's done these amazing things and helping elevate people, but he also is a husband to Nolana, and he has 3 children, Sophia, Omar, and my Maris, who's actually been to my house and played with my own son. So, Mark, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you spending some time with us, man. It's going to be a great conversation.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've watched you guys work before, so hopefully I can fit right in and be a part of this ever-flowing machine. And Will, I tell you, that introduction, man, it makes me look back and say, who are you talking about? Either I'm old or accomplished or neither.
Yeah, then why am I on your show? I know. I'm with you.
I want to point out something, Will, before you get going.
Yeah.
Mark's dancing. Okay.
I know. He's the first guest that's danced. I'm the one who usually has to do that.
Yeah, usually Mark, I always try to get Will to dance at the end of the show. He won't.
Mm-hmm.
So we throw questions. We throw these curveballs at him. He does pretty good, but I was just loving that you came on dancing.
Well, that's good. See, and the dancing I was doing, just for some reference, I'm a Detroiter through and through. And this is called the Blade Icewood dance. So it's like money's raining from the sky. So just so you know.
There's a method to it. To it. Well, hey, Mark, thanks for joining me. Steve, Mark's this guy, and when I first met him on the first day at Florida Power & Light, he's that guy who just brings energy and focus in a room. So I know he'd be a great, and he already is bringing energy to the room. So thanks, Mark. But hey, quickly, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from? What was your upbringing like? Tell me a little bit about that. And then let's talk, high level. How in the world did you end up in the role that you're at right now? Because there's been a pathway to get there.
Yeah. So as I mentioned just a second ago, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I'm the fifth of 6 children. Welfare Section 8 Detroit, not the new and improved Detroit that you see today, But from Detroit, I left and went to Atlanta, attended Morehouse College, and that was the most single-handed, most important decision I ever made in my life. Went to Morehouse, graduated from there in 1988. And then from there, life just kind of took off for me. I went from being an afterthought to being the object of discussion. And, my corporate path kind of started from there. While I was in school, I worked to pay for school by working for the city of Atlanta as a water plant operator. I would work midnight shifts from 11:30 to 7:30,
Wow.
11:30 at night, 7:30 in the morning, and to get up and go to class. And, it was great for me because, my parents didn't have the resources to pay for private education. So me being able to do that, going from making no money a year to making $19,000 a year in my sophomore year of college was just great. And it kind of fueled a fire in me to kind of go ahead and be better and not, make excuses for where I am or let my path be something that defined me. And so working for the city of Atlanta to kind of pay for school just kind of helped me to stay afloat. Once I got out of school, I continued to work at the water treatment plant until I got a job at Reebok. I worked probably the most outstanding job you can have coming out of school if you're a sports fan. I was a street marketer to high school basketball prodigies for Reebok in the city of Atlanta, when Atlanta was like growing, becoming taking a small city in the South to this international conglomerate that we know now. And it was great. And I worked there from about 90 to 95. And what happened was in about the winter of 94, Reebok decided they were moving their regional offices back to the corporate headquarters in Stoughton, Massachusetts. And I think the catalyst for me was that I didn't get an offer to go back to Stoughton, Massachusetts with the rest of folks, even though I did well. And it was because I was a soft science major and because management didn't really feel like at the entry level that it was worth it to pour resources into bringing people up to the corporate office. So I also interpret that to mean that I probably didn't have the business acumen at the time since they brought the soft science part into it. And so with that being the case, I decided I was going to never be not admitted or not have a chance to apply to play in the reindeer games. And so I started seeking that I would go back to graduate school at that time. And in doing so, I talked to, a few programs and a few things, and I came up with this bright idea. This is me trying to be inclusive to a fault again. I came up with this bright idea that since I was a soft science major and I wanted to do something along the lines of helping people within corporate America, I would go back and get a Master of Public Administration. Well, I think, personally, that was probably one of the poorest decisions I've made.
I didn't want to say it. I was like, what are you doing?
So probably, $50,000, and 2 years later, I had just 3 more initials behind my name and nothing else. And so at that point, it's about 1997 now, and I'm thinking I still don't have anything in the chamber. So how do I bridge this gap between corporate America and my soft science degree? And so went at it again, got an MBA in marketing from Clark Atlanta University with an extension to Hong Kong U, where I studied international marketing and strategy. And from that point, that's what things kind of took off.
That's the guy I remember. Okay. The MBA, Mark. Okay. I didn't know you did that path. I guess I never realized that, Mark. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think at this point, I have 3 master's degrees, and I wish I'd have had the right focus at the time because I probably could have had 1 PhD, and I could be a subject matter expert on something instead of being a sprinkler on many things,
Yeah, of course. So real quick, tell me, because I know you've hopped around to different companies and done different things. I mean, like you didn't take the traditional brand management track, though you could have. You've done brand management stuff. You've actually built companies up. You've gone into sales, operations, etc. But now you're in a very unique company many of us have heard of out there at Amazon. So tell us about your experience right now at Amazon, and then especially what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm. So my experience at Amazon was unique, and it kind of it lends itself to just my approach in life. I have dabbled in a lot of things, and that's kind of my nature, and it's kind of how I flow through life. I believe that the path to success and the path to happiness is not necessarily linear. It may be all around, and you'll hear me talk about that as I speak to my background. When I came on to Amazon, I was contacted by a headhunter when I was working for Coca-Cola at the time. I was director of supply chain at Coca-Cola, which meant I was responsible for developing or creating 22 million bottles of sugar water annually. So,
Not less, nothing less.
Production. I had a production team under me, in addition to a logistics team, in addition to a delivery team, all up under me with supervisors and managers that reported up to me. So after doing that for 4 years, I got a call from a headhunter, asked me to consider Amazon because they were building this internal sales consulting team. And what that meant was sellers who are on the Amazon platform selling, if they wanted to cross-sell and upsell their products to have this exponential growth that has become Amazon, they wanted people inside the company who can help them find the levers to actually grow their business and have that exponential growth that we had. So I took over a portfolio of sellers that had about $290 million in annual sales on the Amazon platform. And in 18 months, I grew that to $480 million in annual sales. And at Amazon, no matter what, you're expected to sell. So if you sell 2 units this year, next year you should be able to sell 3 units. The following year you should be able to sell 5 units. The following year you should be able to sell 8 units. And without any additional resources, like we just feel like you should be dialed in and create processes and efficiencies that allow you to scale year over year. And whereas in some businesses that's easily duplicable, in others it's not. So did that for a year, and then we decided we were going to launch a marketplace in Amazon.com.tr, so Amazon Turkey. And so in Istanbul came up, I got a tap on the shoulder to lead a team of managers launching the Amazon.com.tr marketplace. And I readily accepted it. This was, late 2019, accepted it, went over, and boom, this thing called a pandemic hit, right? So the funny thing is this, though. We still have made a commitment to launch because those things go along further upstream. So we still had to grow the business. I just would not be able to have co-offices in, Amazon Turkey and Amazon in the US because we couldn't travel anymore. So my direct reports that would have been in Istanbul became dotted line reports, but I still had the responsibility of growing the numbers. And what I was responsible for then, and what actually drove the business, is the relationships that I had with existing sellers. And those sellers, if they had an EU counterpart, what I had to do is convince them that Turkey was worth the bet in order to grow exponentially. And in the pandemic, it's a different discussion than when it's not a pandemic, because supply chains were setting down, your customer marketplace had shrunk. And within that, you had to be convincing, compelling, and you had to create plans that were not only adoptable, but adaptable. And so that's what helped me, having the relationships with individuals to be able to do that. So in 16 months in that role, we went from 0 to about $270 million in annual sales.
Turkey.
In Turkey. Right. And we weren't even the biggest kid on the block, at that time. So it was really cool, and that's the whole marketplace. So it was really cool to do that, and worked in there for about 16 months, and got a call from somebody who I worked for previously, who had moved over to the Amazon Studio side of business. Now, you have Amazon's core business is one. Then you have, AWS, which is the technology side. And then under Prime Video, you have Amazon Studios, which is all of the programming that you would see when you click on the Amazon Fire Stick. And so within that, we have a DEI team. I sit on the DEI team. And what they were looking for is someone to come in to run a program that had started the year before called the Howard Entertainment Program. And that's a joint conglomerate with Howard University, in which we are bringing 50 people into the entertainment space, because we're trying to find the next set of leaders from historically underserved communities.
Yep.
And so, 25 of those individuals would be in internship role, and 25 of those individuals would be in full-time roles. And so my current job is to cultivate relationships outside of Amazon for full-time hires and inside of Amazon's for interns. And now sometimes that gets mixed because we create talent that sometimes is so dynamic that we want to keep it for ourselves. But if it doesn't align with the interests of the individuals in the program, what happens is then we help them find other entities within the entertainment space in which they can work for them. We've been pretty successful thus far.
That's awesome.
So, Mark, you worked with all these sellers. First of all, I can imagine that assignment was like intimidating. You handed a portfolio of sellers, but obviously you figured out a dynamic that was common with them that you connected with. What was this? What's a successful seller? What's their common thing that you really gelled with that made that part of your career successful?
So I think there's a couple things to being a successful seller. The first thing is that it's the way that Amazon is set up. When people begin to sell on Amazon, you as a seller will know far more about your business than I could ever know by sticking my head in, 2 hours a week and looking at your things. So my job is to find out what has worked for you and then use the internal Amazon levers, which may be promotion, which may be sponsored products program, which may be one of our badges to promote. It may be getting you on Amazon Live, but it's to communicate those things that help you understand how those things can grow your business. So I would talk to you about what has been successful and what has worked. Perhaps, we had told you to store things in the South, but you realized that most of your purchases were coming, from the West Coast. And so maybe it's finding a centralized warehouse and getting your things in another fulfillment center, as opposed to just have them in the South because it's where your core business is located. So being able to look at those type of things and suggest tactics are the things that I would do to help grow the business. And I'll tell you, Steve, it was not really intimidating because I'm a relationships guy. And so I think from a relationship standpoint, you think about things as being transformational as opposed to transactional. And that's typically how I engage with individuals. That's probably why I have the relationship with Will where it is now, because I never counted drinks with Will or counted who paid for the last meal. But I always wanted to just connect with this brother and make sure that we left each other better than when we came together.
I love that quote. Think about things as transformational, not transactional. That's excellent.
Thank you.
So, Mark, and just what you've talked about, I mean, in the last couple of minutes, you've talked about whether you're elevating others from, Howard University's entertainment program to elevating these sellers, to even, helping me in my career and just through conversations. So why do you think elevating others, in particular what you're doing in the DEI community, why does it work in business today? Here's why. You could have gone down the brand management path, Mark, easily. You could be a CMO somewhere. If you wanted to, you could have done that, right? You could grow businesses in lots of other ways. You could grow businesses through technology, but you're choosing to help businesses grow by helping others. So, why that focus on elevating others? What is it about you that finds that so compelling?
I wish it was as simple as me just giving you something anecdotal from inside of me, but I think it's just the way I was reared, and it's the stuff that keeps me up every night. It's the stuff it is the stuff that I think of constantly. Like for me in a new relationship, it's being present. And oftentimes we're not allowed to be present, or what prevents us from being present is looking at being perfect, or either looking at the overall cost of things. And so when I'm forging a new relationship, the first thing I do is try to make sure that I'm the first one to give, because it shows vulnerability and it shows interest in the other person. And so I think what drives that, initially, I think what drove it is feeling like you're not supposed to be there, some of that imposter syndrome kind of stuff. I think that's it initially. And then I feel like that once I am able to, whether it's proved that I'm supposed to be there or find a common ground for us to discuss things on, then what it enables me to do is be vulnerable enough to lean in and let you know that I care. And once individuals know that you care, then it can be more about being present than it is about, what you can get out of the situation. And so I have a mantra that I use every day. I repeat it every day. And in most conversations I use it, and it is presence over perfection. And you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be present. And when you're present, then you truly make an impact and things happen. And so I work on being present a lot, because if you look at my career, if you look at my personality, if you look at just the places I've lived and places I've worked, I have a tendency to approach things from a nonlinear perspective. But the one thing that I can bring wherever I go is a sense of presence so that I can make the connection and not have to worry about being perfect.
Did you learn that from your parents or your grandparents? Who instilled that in you?
I would love to say that was the case, but I think I learned it kind of through trial and error. I mean, so you take like my relation, honestly, you take relationship like that I have with Will. I get to physically see Will probably once every 2 years, once every 3 years. During that time, I want to see Will. Like, I don't want to, do a whole bunch of other stuff. I want to be present and be with him so that I'll have some nuggets that are fuel for thought, food for thought, and fuel for growth until the next time I see him. And then also, even though Will's a subject matter expert, and Will has been driven and on a path to doing what he's doing now for a long time, I didn't have that kind of focus, right? But that doesn't mean that in my presence and leaning in to engage with him as I do with some of my other people who I consider friends and a part of my peer group, that I can't add value. And so it's important for me to add value, and not in the terms of transactional value, but enrichment of the relationship that we have. And so that's why the presence over perfection came, because I would spend so much time trying to worry about being perfect, saying the right things and doing the right things, that I would oftentimes miss out on the connection. And so as I began to dig within and try to figure out what would be the words, the terms that would define what I was trying to accomplish, I came up with presence.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So let's in that, I have this question I'm thinking about. It's like, how do you measure success today? And I want to talk about it. Certainly we could talk about business success, but actual personal success and even the success of others. Like, how would you measure that? How would you define success?
I would define success through relationships. I mean, it's probably not surprising considering some of the things that I've said already. But I think, so listen, I think that when all is said and done, we want individuals that will comfort us and come to support us, whether, we're worth $50 million, whether we're worth $50. And I think the way that you get there is helping people feel seen, helping people feel heard, and helping people feel appreciated. Well, if you can do those things, then what happens is you establish relationships. And then if you establish relationships, what happens is you kind of grow together. You become, a peer group when someone is down. When someone has a sick parent or a sick child, you can offer levels of support that is authentic. And I think the authenticity of relationships is what cements them. Anyone can establish a relationship, right? But when you're authentic and you can be vulnerable in those relationships, and you can invite others to be vulnerable and invite others to contribute to, then that's where the grace, the connectivity, and the grounding occurs. And so for me, I measure it. If you look around the individual and you can see the relationships that they have, typically you can get a sense of what type of person that is, if you will. I would say the one kind of call out that I would say that makes this more about presence and, again, not about perfection, is that within that space, what I just gave you does not necessarily account for introverts, right? So with introverts who might not be amongst people, then it's upon you to engage that person or find a way to get the voice of that person, even if they don't want to be engaged. Yeah. And so I think that's the next part of it, because if you look at my scope of friends and the scope of people who I would consider confidants or mentors or mentees, there are many introverts in there, but they're introverts, but we find a way to communicate, because it may not be as engaging as we're being right now, because they may not feel comfortable with that. Yeah. So you have to create a mechanism, whether it's via email, whether it's through, a phone call, whether it's through text messages, to still meet that person where they are and invite them in to the circle of friendship, if you will, so that you can continue to grow.
Yeah, Steve, it reminds me of that story. I think I shared on a previous show where my boss, Mark, you'll appreciate this, where when I talk about this stuff, I'm extroverted, but deep down inside, I'm pretty introverted. It's hard for me to make friends. I don't have a lot of deep connections. But I remember I was telling Steve that my boss, brought me on stage over at PepsiCo to, she thought she was doing this amazing thing. She was like basically recognizing me in front of a marketing offsite. And if she just understood me deep at the subconscious level, like how horrible that made me feel. We were talking about managing by mind states is the idea I think we were talking about. Like if you understand a person's, whether it's their personality, their mind state, whatever it is that motivates them, you can create relationships that not only help me grow that business, but I would have seen her as such a different person if she would have recognized that was the worst way to reward me is bringing me up on stage. A much better thing would have been a personal email that I could have slid into a folder. You know what I mean? So it's really important when you recognize that people have differences, and then taking those differences into account, whether it's building a relationship or frankly just rewarding, a great employee, hopefully a great employee, that's trying to do good for the company.
Mark, I was listening to your story, and you're being vulnerable, and you're swimming with a lot of sharks. You're in an industry with a lot of rough and tumble, and especially in the entertainment industry. How do you navigate those waters and identify people that are being sincere and people that maybe don't have that motivation that you do have?
Well, I think, Steve, you have to be careful with trying to navigate. Well, not with the navigation, but making those assessments, right? Because that becomes almost like preachy or becomes like judgmental. And whereas we have to judge for our salvation, so to speak, people are dynamic and people evolve and change over time. And so that's why it's important to embrace people where they are. And if you see something and you're really interested in building a relationship, so to speak, then I think it's incumbent upon you to talk to the person about what you see, and you do so through an I feel statement, because that creates ownership, but it gives them an opportunity to espouse why they are either in agreement with you on what you've assessed or whether they're not. And then oftentimes through that exchange, that is what creates the food for growth. And that is also what creates the path for you to navigate around the sharks, because the teeth aren't as sharp once people are encouraged to lean in.
Great answer.
All right. Hey, Mark, we've been talking about lots of, positive things and things that you've done in your career. But one thing we like to do in the show, and we often talk about our failures, and sometimes our failures are the things that we learn the most from, that we benefit. Looking back in hindsight, we're like, man, that unanswered prayer ended up being a prayer that was absolutely answered. So looking back on your career, is there a mistake that you made outside of, your first master's? Is there a mistake that you made that you would looking back that actually you would do something differently, like looking back? And then I want to ask you the same question, where looking back on something you thought was a mistake, now you're like, man, that was the best thing I ever did. So first, do the first one, a mistake, and thinking, looking back, I wish I would have gone and done something differently.
And I say this one kind of tongue in cheek, because I think wherever you go, there you are. But I say that tongue in cheek because if I would have done what I'm about to share right now, then I might not even know Will. So let me say this. So I was in the Harley-Davidson Leadership Development Program, and that's a rotational program in which you learn about the business in 3 different steps. So one is through the corporate business, and I was a marketing analyst at the time. And then the next one is through production. And so you go actually work in the plant and be an inline supervisor. And then the third one is in something else. It could be finance, it could be HR, but really they're trying to create a general manager through this program for Harley-Davidson. So I went right out of business school over to Hong Kong. And then when I went to business school and completed business school, I worked for Harley-Davidson there for a brief time. In there, I was to just write what amounts to a white paper on motorcycle feasibility or motorcycle showroom feasibility there. And so in meeting with people in Chinese motorcycle industry council, if you will, I was able to, do some good things and learn some things. So when I came back to the States, it was time for me to make a rotation into production department. And I had heard when I was getting recruited by Harley-Davidson to be careful, because oftentimes when some of these Fortune 500 companies recruit you, especially if you're an African-American guy, they would promise you one thing and then switch halfway down the path. And so even though this was a rotational program, I was super sensitive to switching from my corporate role into the production role so soon out of school. And I was, because I was scarred from that MPA thing that I talked to you about before. B, I knew that if I took a 18 to 36 month assignment in production, at the end of that rotation, I would have more verifiable experience in production than I would in corporate business leading. And I would be back probably at that same place that I was prior to coming to business school, unless I just wanted to be an inline production manager. And so what happened was when I pushed back, I think the company really was saying, okay, so what do you want to do? What is your suggested recommendation? So they gave me an opportunity to look around the company and see what I wanted to do next, because they agree with me, right? And when I couldn't find anything that I wanted to do, they were like, okay, well, you need to decide by, it was something like July 30th, if you want to do that, or, what you want to do within the company. And in that time, I was still getting calls for interviews from other companies. So I got a call from FBL to come in and be on the brand management team at FBL. And so when I told the folks at Harley Davidson that I was going to leave and move to South Florida to work for FPL, it was not met very happily. As you might imagine, it was not met very happily, and it was the decision I made. And I think that, not that the decision that I made was not a good decision, but I do wonder now that if I'd have stayed the path in almost a protected, crafted way, where would I be now? And I wonder if the nurturing that I've received from, swimming in a nonlinear path would probably be more disciplined and more structured because of the Harley Davidson path. And sometimes I wonder, where would I be without that? But I typically don't look back because of the relationship piece. And so, as I told you before, when I started this conversation, if I don't take that move and go to South Florida, then I don't know will, and a cadre of other folks that I do know, and the experience that I had with renewable energy, with living in South Florida, with just doing some of the things that define who I am today, I probably wouldn't have had that scenario. So that's the one I regret. My biggest regret, probably, or what I would say is, I don't know if it's a failure, is leaving Harley Davidson before seeing the 3 to 5 year rotation of that program pan out.
So then, Will, you're going to have the next question. All right, let's flip that, right?
Flip it. There's some stuff at the time you're like, what did I do, man? I just cost, whatever. It could be corporate, or it could be something else. But then now looking back, like, man, that was the best, like, kind of unanswered prayer I ever got, or, best thing for me.
Yeah. So when I think about, that kind of stuff, Will, what happens for me, because I have so far exceeded like what I thought I would become, in terms of just growing up in Detroit. I mean, in Detroit, where I grew up, you were in essence, you were rich and you were doing it real big. If you were an inline foreman at a plant and you were making $30 an hour, you were the man, And so, I passed that. But I think, from a success standpoint, or something that I thought was problematic initially, when Amazon was looking to define whether or not they would acknowledge the King holiday as a official holiday, or whether they would just give you what we like to call generic personal time off on that particular day. I was an officer with the Amazon Ben Black Employee Network. And so I was a part of a core team of 4 people who wrote a paper saying why this should happen. And so we had to submit that to our leadership team. And at the time, not Bezos, the guy who left right after him was the CEO, flannel shirt. I can't think of his name right now, but Andy Jackson succeeded him. Man, I'll tell you in a minute. Jeff Wilkie, that's his name. He was the president of the company, and he was our executive sponsor for the Black Employee Network. But we had to present the paper to him, and then he got us an audience to present it. And I remember presenting the paper to him and thinking, because it wasn't well received initially. People saying, well, you already have personal days. Take them how you want. What is this? And why are we doing this? And why are we discussing this? And we were also at the time trying to push for, other initiatives. But the main thing was that. And so I remember getting back, and we kind of getting called into the principal's office about not having data to support our decision around this recommendation. And I don't know where you would get such data from. You could talk about employee happiness. You could talk
Yeah.
about, some of those things. So I remember coming back and sitting and saying, man, this is crazy. And I remember
That's for
also being a part of my performance review that year, not in a bad way, but it was noted. And I was thinking my manager or my boss didn't have anything to do with this. This is something working off the side of my desk. And
Yeah.
so I remember lamenting that, even though I got, exceeds expectations type of rating. So I remember sitting with that and wishing that I hadn't done it. I felt like it was the right thing to do, but I felt like, being a part of that presentation team and having my
Yeah,
name on the
right.
paper that was written about that could have been a career limiting move. Well, what happens is in 2020, Amazon came back, which was 2 years later, and made the King holiday an actual, company recognized holiday. And it was largely in part through the works of our affinity group. And so, what created a lot of angst before was something that the broader audience benefited from. And our group got credit for leading the charge there. And so that was a big moment for me. And that was a situation in which initially I thought might have been problematic, but it ended up being a good thing.
Yeah, I love that. Great story. Great
That's,
story.
That's a theme in your message is vulnerability, putting yourself out there, right?
Yes.
Taking the first move and on something like that, when something that you believe and you need to speak it, even though it can cost you personally, right? And there's always that doubting voice that happens later. Oh man, you should have done that. And it's like, no, you need to sit in it and just take the medicine. But deep down, Mark, that's who you are, isn't it?
Yeah. I think those are moments that, like, in the moment, Steve, you don't really know how important they are.
Mhm.
I heard someone use a term. I read it in a book recently. I think it was a book by Mike Irwin, but it said, when you're going through turbulent times, embrace the suck. And it says, don't necessarily, within that, it doesn't mean stop trying to get to a better disposition, but embrace the suck and continue to ask yourself, what am I supposed to get out of this?
Yeah.
In order to be a better person because of it. And so in my trials and tribulations, I have often found myself, just in a situation where I'm like, gosh, I don't want to be here. But whether it's through prayers, whether it's through mindfulness, or whether it's just sometimes just sitting and being still, I am really seeking for the method to the madness, or the message that I'm supposed to get out of this and carry forward. And so that was one of those times.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we've talked a little bit about it where, we from a Christian perspective, we talk about that when you're in those moments, that if you embrace the suck, that what you're really doing is you're creating greater perseverance, and letting God work on you to understand what you're trying to learn from. So by trying to pray your way out of it or try to get out of it, it actually is going against God's will, right? And so that's what people say. It's like, no, you have to embrace the suck because there's a purpose behind the suck. And that purpose, I was just sharing it with a team last week where a friend of ours, former Navy SEAL, looks, just a brick house, man. Huge, like the most healthy person you'd ever imagine. And he got Hodgkin's and he couldn't understand it. And he's like, well, I did everything right. I exercise every day. I fought for our country, everything else. But what he kind of, to embrace the suck, is he reframed it and he thought of it, the world of, but what if I'm taking on Hodgkin's so my daughter doesn't?
Yep.
What if, and that just got him through it because he found purpose in the suck, right? He found purpose and he made it and everything's fine. But it was this idea of, rather than trying to get rid of it, will it off, he said, nope, I'm going to embrace it because I'm still able to serve. And that was his mentality. It's crazy mentality. I don't know if I could even pull that off. It's amazing. Well, a Navy SEAL can do a lot of things that none of us can do, right?
Right. So, but Will, and I like that. And I don't mean to get preachy, but you talked about faithfulness and honoring God as a Christian. What I will say is, even this from a preachy standpoint, like people tend to really amplify their relationship with a higher power, whether it's God or whatever you believe in, when times are tough, right? And they kind of don't have anywhere else to turn. What I typically want to challenge people to do, just from that standpoint, is to have the faith that they say they espouse. Because if there was certainty, then you don't need faith, right? If you know that just when something goes bad, you can be like, okay, I'm going to pray. I'm going to look to a higher power. I'm going to go into my own cocoon. Then you don't need faith. But faith should sturdy you to know that you are being used for a purpose that is beyond what you can conceive. And when you have that faith, then you don't have to question anything else.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it. So, real quick. So we have in our audience people who from all walks of life, and some of them are young, Mark. In fact, because I bring in students from Texas A&M. I teach over Texas A&M University, and then I get lots of questions. I've had 3 meetings this week with people who are just getting out in their career, and they're confused, man, because college doesn't teach them how to be successful in life. What advice would you give somebody? They're just starting out. They're 23, 22 years old. What advice could you give somebody just starting in the industry, whether it's marketing or otherwise? And what skills do you think would be good for anybody coming out in today's world? What skills should they develop?
So I think the first advice that I would give someone young or someone, just coming out of school, and I just told you I manage 50 to 100 of these individuals a year, and it's so hard just the way that kind of like society is today, but stop taking things personally. It is so not about you. It is so not. And even when somebody's a jerk, it is not about you. It's about the stuff that's within them. So stop taking things personally. And so once you get past the fact that it's like someone is deliberately dumping on you or crapping on you, then you can kind of see a broader picture, right?
Yep.
That's the first thing. The next thing is, I would say, have a plan for where you want to be. I'm going to make it micro first, the first 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days, because those will give you benchmarks. And write that plan down. If it's only like 5 bullets, 7 bullets, or 10 bullets, because what happens is we evolve and we overcome obstacles. We forget what our perspective was when we started on the journey. And so halfway through the journey, you can look back and remind yourself why you started on this path in the first place. Then that helps you to have fuel to go to the second phase. And then when you get from the 60 to the 90-day phase, what that means is at that point, you've had a quarter of a year. And what you've done in that timeline, good, bad, or indifferent, is almost impossible to undo. If you're seen as a genius, people will say,
Forever.
that guy started off as and he's a rock star. I know he's a rock star. And if you're seen as a lummox, folks are like, that's what you get. And so it's important to define your 30, 60, 90-day goals up front with the help of your manager or a mentor in the organization, so that way you can know you're aiming for the right things. And as you accomplish those things, make sure you go back and refer to your original compass to get there. And then I would say, from a tertiary skill standpoint, I would say right now, 2 things are dominating the marketplace in terms of development. And one of them is data analytics. Be able to get deep into your numbers. And I'm saying, I won't tell you to go back and learn coding, and I won't tell you to go back and, take a data analytics class, but I would say be able to use what I call the 3rd degree level of Excel tools. So like pivot tables, like filtering function, like all of the macros in Excel. If you can do that, that can help you. It'll save you a lot of time. That can help you to get to the heart of the matter a lot easier than you were before. I mean, I probably developed that skill when I started to interact with large volume sellers who had a plethora of products going across and a lot of different variations going down. So those were the things that helped me there. And I would say the next thing is be able to articulate the importance and the understanding of, I would say, artificial intelligence. I think that is so dominant right now, and it's such a rich topic that if individuals can find a way to incorporate that into the work that they do already and be earnest about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the concerns right now is that people are not earnest about using it. And that's the concern, that people will take credit for something that they didn't create. But I think if you're able to understand and be able to explain it in a way that's going to bring significance to the work that you do, I think it will be embraced. So those will be the things that I would say right now.
Mark, I'm just thinking while you were talking, your theme about being present, right? Mm-hmm. And when that advice you just gave to the young folks, it's like there's leaders out there that are having to make business decisions on the fly by gut. They got so much information, and to have someone that understands them and helps them identify data and then lay it out you're empowering that leader to do better.
Yeah.
And that's such great advice that you're giving.
Thank you, C.
I agree. Well, unfortunately, our time, we could have kept talking. Like I had another 13 questions here. We could have kept talking and talking and talking, Mark, but this was an amazing discussion. So, you probably inspired a few people out there. Like what if somebody wanted to just reach out to connect with you? How would they do that?
Well, there are a couple ways. There's my email address, right? And that is, 1hatch1@gmail. And so you can reach out to me that way. And then I have a website that's under construction right now called hatchyourworld.com. And that should be, it's in the finishing stages now. I don't know if it would be as fancy as the Mindstate.
We can talk about it.
Right. But you should be able to follow me and track me there. And I'll say this too. About 3 weeks ago, Will and I had a conversation just kind of on the fly, and he kind of planted a seed in me to kind of get together some text around some of the things I've shared today. And I've started to brainstorm that, and I've already created kind of like an outline and started to have conversations about, putting together like a book to share some of these findings and share some of my learnings and be able to amplify why it's important to not only engage but develop employees, why affinity groups help you create more sound organizations, and why pathway programs can also help companies to grow exponentially as they build for the future. And so those are the things that are within me. And, hopefully I'll have something published within the next year to be able to
Mark Hatcher, you made a commitment on a live show that's going to be out in the audience. You have to do it now. You just committed, buddy. So
that's right.
It's sold. It's sold now for sure.
Yeah.
Two great quotes. Think about relationships as transformational, not transactional, and being present over being perfect. I put presence there, but I'm not trying to be perfect, am I?
That's right.
I was present.
You're fine, Steve. You're fine.
Walking the walk, brother. All right. What a great show. Hey,
sure
Mark. Will, I don't know what you're doing, but you're fishing at the right guest spot.
Yeah.
You're bringing some good ones, man.
Well, I've noticed that if we just let them talk a lot, we end up in a pretty good place, Steve. So that's the secret. Dynamic people and let them talk.
You guys tag team really well, and this is a great show. I had a good time, and I know that you'll continue to go on down the Mindstate path. And it was great just interacting with you guys after watching the videos, and may you always choose presence over perfection and courage over comfort, and continue to grow as individuals. Till the next time.
That's the Mindstate Marketing Hour, where we like to dance at the end of the show, where you learn how to use science to connect with your clients. Hey, it's the human understanding model, which Mark really helped and added to the conversation. Will's got a book. It's called Marketing the Mind States. If you hadn't read it and you're in the marketing world, you're creating content, guess what you're writing? One size fits all content. Marketing the Mind States helps you connect, understand the state of mind your folks are in, and dial in your stuff. You can learn more at themindstategroup.com. And then I'm going to do this nice little rollout here. Mark, you've done a great job. Really enjoyed having you. Oh, I always do this, Kristen. Let me turn this off. Hey, we got a podcast. It's everywhere that you like to listen to podcasts. So you don't have to just watch, but if you like watching and you like to see how we all have the same haircut, you can see it on YouTube channel. It's the Mindstate channel. What a great show. Let's do this again. We'll see you next week. Anybody, you want to sing with me here? You want to sing?
This is your time to shine, Steve.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, here we go.